In a previous episode, we looked at how the fetch method on hash can be used to assert that a given hash key is present. But what if the key error that hash raises doesn't provide enough context for a useful error message? Along with the key to fetch, the fetch method can also receive an optional block. This block is evaluated if, and only if, the key is not found. Knowing this, we can pass a block to fetch which raises a custom exception. Now when this code encounters an unexpectedly missing key, the raised exception will explain both the problem and where to find more information. The block argument to fetch isn't just for raising errors, however. If it doesn't raise an exception, fetch will return the result value of the block to the caller, meaning that fetch is also very useful for providing default values. So, for instance, we can provide a default email address when none is specified. Now, you may be wondering, what's the difference between using fetch for defaults and using the OR operator for default values? While these may seem equivalent at first, they actually behave in subtly but importantly different ways. Let's explore the differences. Here's an example of using the OR operator for a default. This code receives an options hash and uses the logger key to find a logger object. If the key isn't specified, it creates a default logger to standard out. If the key is nil or false, it disables logging by substituting a null logger object. This works fine when we give it an empty hash. But when we pass false as the value of logger, we get a surprise. That was supposed to be a null logger, not the default logger. So what happened here? The problem with using OR with a hash for default values is that it can't differentiate between a missing key versus a key whose value is nil or false. Here's some code to demonstrate. In contrast, fetch only resorts to the default when the given key is actually missing. When we switch to using fetch in our logger defaulting code, it works as intended. When you want to provide a default value for a missing hash key, consider carefully whether you want an explicitly supplied nil or false to be treated the same as a missing key. If not, use fetch to provide the default value. Okay, that's all for today. Happy hacking!